Bigger than capes.
Give me some outside.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it, and then I watched it.
Oh, right.
Hello and welcome to Bigger Than Capes. This is our August indie comics roundup because it's the start of September, which means it's the end of August. I'm Zach and I'm joined by Angela and Matt. How you guys doing?
Zach. Hi, Angela.
Hello, Matt. Hello, Zach. I'm doing all right.
Yeah, I'm good. I've got a will-shaped hole in my heart, but
we've all got that. Will cannot be with us this week for
But
reasons.
Zach, how are you doing? I believe you've got some big news.
I do have some big news.
You had a haircut.
Dream on. I can't afford haircuts. I opened a comic book shop.
Yay!
And a very nice comic book shop at that.
I like to think so. It's
I hear you had a very handsome man come and help you put up shelves.
You mean Josh?
Yeah. I helped him. I was the little troll man.
This is true. So yeah, we've been open a few days now, probably a week at this point. We're Volume 1 Comics, and we are in Hatch on Oxford Road in Manchester.
Yeah.
You can find us on Google or by going outside.
Because that is allowed at the moment.
It is.
Yeah, for now we're allowed outdoors. I don't know how long it's going to last. Don't want to jinx it,
Yeah, we'll keep that quiet.
So have either of you read any good books since we were last on together?
Well, I have started a project.
Oh God,
Zach,
forgot about this.
Zach knows about this.
Oh,
groaning.
I don't.
Zach read all of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm trying to read all of Prince Valiant, starting in 1937.
Fuck me.
Suddenly makes my 8 years of Turtles seems totally reasonable now.
Now, that's gonna be weird. In part because Prince Valiant is sometimes textless, and sometimes is single panel.
Yes, because it's newspaper strips.
Yes.
So it started off as a full page in 1937. I'm halfway through 1937. What I love about it is at the end of one adventure, it basically says, and our hero only slayed 7 people. Good
Yes.
thing. Which is my favourite thing.
Prince Valiant is often gorgeous, though, as well.
The art is really, really good. There's some really lovely stuff in it.
Did this stem from you accidentally buying some Prince Valiant in all of the Valiant searching on eBay, or was this just a coincidence?
It's kind of, I was looking for Valiant on eBay because it's everyone needs a hobby, right?
Yeah.
And I did stumble across someone and it said Prince Valiant, and I thought, you know what? It's been years since I've even looked into Prince Valiant. And then I fell down an internet rabbit hole, and I've come out with the first 3 volumes that have been reprinted by Fantagraphics.
Are they the big, oversized?
They're blooming massive. The box was so heavy.
They're newspaper size, aren't they? Not tabloid. They're broadsheet size, aren't they? Or are they tabloid?
Tabloid size.
Right.
Which is still pretty big.
Pretty big. More sort of graphic album, sort of than what we'd normally have. But wow, yeah. It's Hal Foster, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
He did it for literal decades.
Yeah.
When did Prince Valiant officially end?
It hasn't. That's the thing. It's still going. It's the longest running unbroken comic newspaper strip in history of the world. Yeah.
Where is it coming from now?
It's still printed in newspapers. It's still syndicated.
Just strips just show up at the offices of the paper. No one knows who it was anymore.
I can't remember who's doing it at the moment, because a lot of the creative team over the years have now passed away for obvious reasons. Old age being the key one. So but I may never catch up with it. But luckily, because it's done in a newspaper and it's now like a half page, so there's not as much material now being produced. So, give me 50 years and I may get somewhere with this. Check in with me in a year's time and we'll see whether I've got to the 1940s or not.
Did you ever watch The Legend of Prince Valiant?
Of course I did.
Yeah, because
you must know me by now, man.
I was like, I was just thinking, you must have. Because I did on CBBC.
I have the soundtrack, yes. I have the soundtrack. It brings back many memories. Yeah,
I watched it on CBBC, and I spent years trying to figure out what it was I'd watched. And because I was convinced, I was like, okay, it was like a night show, and there was King Arthur stuff in there. And then eventually I was like, it must have been Prince Valiant. And Prince Valiant's cool in its own way. I have not done any sort of huge project like that, though, as I think I've said a couple of times before on this podcast, I've started a Berserk reread.
Yes.
Because I've finally gotten some money through to order the perfect editions, like the lovely leather-bound 3-in-1s that Dark Horse have been putting out for the last 2-3 years. I'd never had the money or the space before now, and I've got the money, still don't have the space.
It's overrated as a concept.
Yeah, but I'll figure something out for that. And I needed them to replace my paperback ones that I'd been slowly getting rid of when they started putting out the leather-bound ones. And other than that, I reread Pantheon for the first time in years because I bought it from Zach because I don't own it anymore, or didn't own it anymore. And it's still really, really funny and good. There's so many gags I'd forgotten in there. I'm pretty sure as soon as I finished it, immediately texted Zach saying, do you remember that there's the weird, Mrs. Doubtfire joke in there that's really well drawn in a very odd way? And he was like, there is, isn't there? And I was like, yeah, it's great. And I also, basically, a lot of what I've bought this last month and read has been stuff that I've either sort of read all of before and just either no longer own or never owned. And the other one, the last one, was finally getting a copy of Shigeru Mizuki's Nonnonba, which Shigeru Mizuki's one of my favorite mangaka and comics creators in general. And at some point, I might just have to get someone to read some stuff he's done so that I can talk with them about him and how fucking incredible he is. Zach's trying to not attract any attention right now, so I don't draw him into this.
I think he sounds like a Will kind of problem.
I definitely think it's a Will kind of problem.
I mean, he did a lot of very good autobiographical books, and Angela, you like history, don't you?
I do like history, yes.
He did an entire series on the history of Japan over about an 80-year span, which is very good. It's called Showa, a history of Japan, and it's covers the entirety of the Showa period, which is very, very good. And also he did one about his service in World War II in Guam, where he got his arm blown off and had to reteach himself to draw with his other arm. He's very good, and I love him so much. He died a year or two ago at 1 billion years old.
As old as the universe.
Yeah. So that's been my time. I started talking about Shigeru Mizuki, and I find it very hard to stop when I do that.
See, Zach's had no time because he's opened a
No.
comic book shop.
So
Zach, what books
welcome
have
to
you,
our September roundup. It's the end of September.
Yeah. So Zach, what books have you scanned into your system over the last month?
Too many to count, mate.
That's the closest I'm getting to reading them at the moment. So yeah.
I'll have you know, I've read all of August's copy of Previews World.
Oh.
And that is a thick book.
Yeah, I think you've
Would not recommend.
probably done the most reading of any of us.
Yeah.
I've just read so many blurbs that I can't remember what the books are called. I just recognise them based on trivia. Yeah. Oh, man. I feel like I've read some stuff. I've read some singles. I finished reading Barbaric. It's like the first 3 issues.
It's really good, right?
It's really good, yeah. Seems like only yesterday we were talking about issue 1.
in a similar setting.
But yeah, Barbaric's really good. Looking forward to the next arc next year.
Are you up to date on 6 Sidekicks?
Yes, yeah. We 3 issues in.
Yeah, very good, isn't it?
Yeah, issue 3 was good. Maybe better than issue 2. It's good, and I think as the cast is expanded, it kind of gets more interesting and more diverse and more weird. But 6 Sidekicks has been good, and other stuff, mostly like website stuff, I guess. I've been reading. I against my better judgment, I once again have Marvel Unlimited, so I'm gonna make the effort to catch up on like Runaways and Immortal Hulk and the stuff that.
And I finally convinced you to get on Shonen Jump as well. Talking of you signing up to subscription services.
This is true. I'm not up to date on that either because everything I was reading from Viz, I can't remember where I'm up to, so I need to like figure that out. Especially now that it's in chapters on Shonen Jump rather than in volumes. So that's I don't know how to figure that out, Matt. It's going to take me ages.
Okay, just whenever you look at it, just take a deep breath and just center yourself. Try and remain calm.
Focus
and look at the numbers.
Yeah.
So many numbers.
They go in order.
But yeah, I'm all about just signing up to more and more subscription things at the moment, apparently.
Whilst having less and less time.
Yeah.
So if you have a subscription service with comics or manga,
and you need a patron who won't give you any bandwidth issues.
Yeah, Zach's your man.
I'm going to read some stuff though this week. I've got slightly more free time, I think. That's probably a lie, but I'm going to try. So, on that bombshell, should we get to this week's comics that we're rounding up?
Or this month's, yeah.
Did I say this week?
Yeah. They're all this week.
Well, it is this week as well.
True.
I will. 2 things. The first book we're going to talk about didn't actually come out in August, but we're idiots, and here we are.
Well, it got delayed, to be fair to us.
It was to be one.
It will be out by the time that we release this.
Yeah. And also, in my things that please me is that we are actually doing 4 books from 4 different publishers, which is something I often say.
Yeah,
which is
all with different authors, isn't that right?
Sure could be. So Matt, I believe you're up first on the introduction in.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this month we have read Deadbox #1. It's a book by Mark Russell with art by Benjamin Tiesma, colours by Vladimir Popov, and letters by Andworld. Yeah, so Deadbox is set in the fictional, like, I think Deep South, by all the Deep South, or like some sort of weird Midwest, but probably deep South. People don't seem quite sort of aggressively friendly enough for it to be the Midwest. Like town called Lost Turkey. It is a sort of very like evangelical kind of in the middle of nowhere, like flyover town. Like they, are very clear to note it doesn't even have like Wi-Fi or like much in terms of modern amenities. And we follow like through this issue like Penny, who works in like a convenience store sort of gas station situation, that like works in like a convenience store that has the town's only sort of movie rental service called the Deadbox, that allows people to come and rent DVDs and films. And the strange thing about it is that the films don't seem to exist. Like they, you put them in and you play them and they're real, but they don't seem to have any sort of existence outside of this box. You can't find them anywhere else. They have no online presence or anything, and they seem to have some sort of mystical correlation connection to the people that rent them, or to like a situation that's going on in the town. Like Penny's father is slowly is very sick and seems to slowly be dying, and she rents a film called The Lonely Planet, about a man traveling 200 years, which sort of due to relativity is about 50 years to him, to be the first contact between humans and aliens. And that's kind of it for the book. How do people feel about this one?
Confused, lost and alone. And
yes,
I think right. So the blurb for Deadbox kind of says, welcome to Lost Turkey, where the main source of entertainment is a cursed DVD machine that seems to know more about the fate of its citizens than they do. And in my mind, I'd kind of pictured this as like a horror anthology type book, like Ice Cream Man-esque.
Yeah.
And this seems very un-horror. I don't know if that's...
See, like, I get that, like, the way that I read this is that, like, we find out that that Penny was supposed to was supposed to be going back to university before her dad got sick. And her dad, we also know, rented a DVD called The Vanishing Man.
Yeah.
Which, like, and she rented this The Lonely Planet, and like The Vanishing Man looks to obviously reflect on her father and his situation with regards to like fading away, and
yes.
like fading away into sickness and kind of into the background. Like, no one else in the issue sees him or talks to him other than Penny, and he's becoming hollow. And for Penny, the Lonely Planet, I feel like kind of like the journey that the volunteer sort of astronaut is on represents her possibly being stuck in the town for like until she can't leave anymore, until she's not the person she needs to be to strike out in the world.
Yeah, and I think, as we discussed pre-recording, that there's different ways to read it, because I kind of read it more as, well, that, but in the sense that like it was the story of missed opportunity, because
yes.
in The Lonely Planet we see that the volunteer who gets shot through space to meet the Greylix on their planet is kind of ready to meet them and they're ready to meet him for the longest of time, yet when he gets there it's kind of too late. And I guess that was the reading I was put into kind of Penny missing the year at college.
See, I had a different reading again now, thinking about it. This is the problem, because there's that whole bit at the beginning of the book where it talks about how you basically can't own a thing like land, or the more people try and own a thing, the less they own it. Particularly because of the setting in the South, we assume. I felt, where is this going, metaphor-wise? Are we gonna? Because there's a bit where we've got a tattered American flag and all that sort of iconography. So it kind of threw me out, because like Zach, I was just expecting basically haunted DVD box. Yes. Horror ensues. And then that opening talks about, all this about, owning land and coming together, and just to give you background to the town. And it doesn't really seem to relate to haunted DVD box much at all. I was expecting a very different direction. I thought, this is setting something up, like this town is so insulated and weird that it's a perfect setting for a DVD box to become haunted or possessed or some such. As it turns out, that's not the case.
Well, we don't know, about what the actual situation is like in terms of the bigger sort of story, like the bigger kind of background set piece for the anthology. Not the anthology, it's an anthology in terms of the stories. I think that's going to be the situation. That's the feeling that I get, is that we'll probably get quite a lot of single issue stories, and then occasionally go and visit some of the characters again. Is the kind of feel I get from this. I wasn't, but I mean, don't get me wrong, by the end of it, I wasn't 100% sold on any particular interpretation. My main takeaway from this book was genuinely really loving The Lonely Planet as a kind of take on golden age science fiction, like a cross between one of your more humorous Asimov stories mixed with a Bradbury in the Martian Chronicles, those particularly the Martian Chronicles stuff, because it's it's a twist story with a joke kind of in it, at the expense of the core conceit that by traveling through space for 50 years with purpose and with that kind of the very task makes you unqualified to perform it. It's a good story. I really, really like that. But yeah, that I found that kind of tickling my science fiction short story itch. Tickling my itch. What am I saying?
Scratching your itch.
Yeah, scratching that sort of science fiction short story itch. Maybe more than the rest. Don't get me wrong, I love a good small town, evangelical story, and that part I am interested in. But that's going to be, I think, a longer burn. Whereas as a single issue, if the stories it tells in its films, each issue are going to be as good as that, I'm actually willing to kind of forgive a little bit more, I think, than either of you.
Yeah,
I mean, sorry.
That middle bit where we have got, The Lonely Planet, that's actually the best bit, because you can just read that and you get something out of it. It's the framing around it I find awkward.
Yeah, I think that it's the problem of attempting to tell a high concept single issue science fiction story whilst also telling the framing narrative that I think is going to kind of be built around it over time. And I do think, I know we say this fairly often, but I think this will be a very good trade read. Actually, like more than it's a weird one, because I want to say I could also very much say, oh, it'll be a great single issue read if the films are if the film concepts are as well executed as this one is, because I'd be like, I want to see what sort of weird story and genre and tone like we get this month. But I think that just because of the framing narrative, it'll be a good trade read.
Yeah, I think it will probably read well as a trade, and I think we will follow different people, like the man with the gun.
Man with the gun. He had a name, but
Buck. He's called Buck. I feel we see Buck in the kind of fake robbery prank thing, and then we see him at the start. So I feel like we're going to shift around, probably see Buck, the police officer, the dog.
I'm hoping for the dog. I'm there for the dog. Yeah.
So I think it can go in some interesting directions. It's not entirely what I expected, but I didn't really dislike it. I think I had pretty much signed up for some kind of like that's a good example. So Vault a couple of years ago released 2 volumes from Elliot Rahal's Cult Classics series, which was kind of quite campy, ridiculous B-movie horror. And I think I'd signed up for that. I think that's Deadbox based on the description. I expected ridiculous, overblown B-movie style horror. Almost like Goosebumps-esque, where everything's just real dumb. And I think
it has great covers.
Yeah, the covers are where it's at. But that's not really the direction this has gone in, which I guess has just surprised me, because I expected more horror, or maybe more cartoonish horror, but more horror nonetheless. I do think this is, like you've said, I think The Lonely Planet as a narrative is quite good and is very reminiscent of Asimov or Philip K. Dick or other such sci-fi writers are available.
Yeah.
So I don't dislike this. I just think it was very different than what I'd kind of anticipated.
Yeah, that would be the same for me. I was expecting a horror book, and it's kind of, I suppose there are horrific elements to it. Like, it's subtle horror, shall we say, in a way. Particularly at the end where you see her dad and it's like but yeah, overall that's the actual descriptive term. But yeah, at the same time, it's not what I expected, and I think that threw me. And then it wasn't even what I expected based on the first few pages. I'd sort of then thought, oh, maybe it's going this direction. Then it didn't go that direction. So I just ended up a bit confused by it. It probably will read better in trade. It will probably be more interesting in trade when you can maybe see some of the other characters and actually see what what other DVDs are lurking. But as it stands as a first issue, it just doesn't quite click for me.
I agree.
There we go. Have we anything further to add?
Possibly not.
I don't think so. I think that's us for the Deadbox.
Right, which means that coming up in the number 2 position of discussion is the second book we are discussing, some might say.
We're all a little bit fried, aren't we?
We are, we really are. Right, so the second book we're discussing is Second Chances, number 1, from Image. The writer is Ricky Mamone, the artist is Max Bertolini, and the letterer, special shout out to DC Hopkins. So Second Chances is about second chances. There is a chap. Is it Winslow Gray? Is that his name?
LeBlanc, I think.
He's the guy. Who's Winslow? I get confused.
Winslow is the lawyer that Emma works for.
So he is. He's the creepy dude. Right, okay. So let's just all leave this in because ramblings are content. So there is a guy called LeBlanc, depends whether you want to pronounce it the French way or not, who runs a business, and his business is a little bit shady. He gives people second chances by basically faking their deaths, telling them they can never see their loved ones again, and setting them up in a cabin in the woods, essentially.
Yay.
Hooray. Back in the day, he had some dealings with a chap called Paul. Paul rings him, a little bit fraught. There's dead bodies everywhere. Anyone would. Paul has like the picture perfect family. He has a wife called Mary, has a daughter called Emma. Emma works for the creepy guy Winslow Gray. She's like, I want to quit, but it's basically my dad's company and my dad's job, and I want to strike out on my own. Emma's quite nice. Emma then gets accosted by Miss Nobody, who injects her with drugs, and then murder happens, and then Miss Nobody rings LeBlanc. Meanwhile, Paul's getting killed by some assassins because dead bodies and reasons, assassins with weird masks. And then LeBlanc stumbles across all of these things that have happened. And yeah, it's a book that exists. It's not a book that I loved, I'll be honest. It's in black and white, and I miss colorists. I'm always gonna have problems generally with black and white comics. There are one or two exceptions over the years I've read that I've enjoyed, but it feels like it's deliberately playing on the black and white to do a noir thing, which I don't necessarily think you need to do. But at the same time, I don't sort of know what genre it's really pitching itself at. There's the mystery of Miss Nobody. There's the mystery of the dead bodies and who's assassinating Paul and why has LeBlanc got messed up on all of this, and is Winslow Gray actually a creep or not? Who's to say? What's happening to Emma? If you actually read the blurb, it gives you it gives you a very different idea of what this book is about than what actually happens in it, because I think the blurb just sort of says that he's a guy who gives people second chances and now he has to relocate someone with amnesia. And that sort of happens towards the end of the book with Emma, kind of, maybe, possibly. But yeah, it doesn't really flip the blurb. It didn't fit with anything I was expecting, because it takes quite a while for you to realise what LeBlanc's job is, actually relocating people and doing the whole second chances thing when he just lays it out in exposition. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one again. It's not what I expected again. It's throwing me off and confusing me again. Thoughts, anybody?
So I agree with a lot of what you're saying. So essentially it's pitched to us, I think, in the blurb, or at least in this, as with the right amount of cash, a proper referral, and a good reason to start over, I can give you a new life.
Yeah.
Except none of that really happens in this book.
None of that.
No. No, we don't really see any of that, do we?
No. He explains that to us and kind of talks about how he's already bailed Paul out once.
Yeah.
But he also talks about how he doesn't do third chances. So if he's already bailed Paul out once, and then there's a lot that's kind of set up to build intrigue about LeBlanc's past. So we're told that he does all of this because of the worst mistake he ever made. We're told that Paul saved his life once, so he owes him a favour. And then Miss Nobody's clearly part of that past.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's basically expecting you to accept that the hook for this is that LeBlanc does have a past.
Like pretty much every other comic book character you may come across.
Except Wolverine.
Yeah, he doesn't. True.
So yeah, it's kind of bloodshot. I said it. I said bloodshot, and you go true, yeah.
Yeah, true, yeah.
True.
So I don't really know. I don't dislike this.
Same.
I kind of like the art and the kind of the cover, whilst having no connection to everything. I think is pretty cool with the kind of smoky vibes to it and the like reflections and stuff. Some great layering on Photoshop. I'll give them that. I just don't know what I think.
I wish I had stronger feelings about this book.
It doesn't have it. Yeah, it just doesn't have a big enough hook in a way.
Yeah, like I said, the hook is basically that you're just meant to need to know more about LeBlanc, and if you don't, it's not very hooky. I don't know how to feel about any of the characters particularly. So like Paul's brief, Mary we never see, Emma
drugs
and then murders. Winslow Gray is included, but I don't really feel like he's included for you to care.
Yeah.
I feel like Emma's little story arc of her working as Winslow Gray's secretary and then deciding to, she decided she's going to quit, but first she wants to hack his computer again because he's into tickle fetish porn, and she finds that entertaining. It's like there's more structure to that, like 3 or 4 pages than the perhaps is to the rest of this.
Though I want to say that I was reminded actually during her talking about like the tickle fetish porn. I was reminded of a documentary I watched years ago called Tickled, which was about like a guy.
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah. Interesting doc. It about a guy like producing tickle torture porn and the weirdness that was this man and like the shadiness of the whole situation. And I was like, I should watch Tickled again at some point.
Maybe that should have been really the storyline and plot.
Oh, what? It's just that it's the comic book adaptation of the documentary Tickled.
No, I think Emma finds out that Winslow Gray has tickle porn on his computer. Oh. What does she do with this knowledge? Where does she take it? Who does she blackmail?
I thought that you were going to say that. What's his name? Why have I lost his name? LeBlanc was actually the tickle man and was showing up to tickle people.
Any of these options
because he doesn't carry a gun.
Quite interesting. No, he doesn't
carry a gun because you don't need a gun to tickle people.
It's hard sentence to unpack.
I think the fact we've gone so far off the beaten track proves
there are like
how unmemorable most of
at points the art's actually very good.
Yeah.
And the lettering.
Sure someone else said that.
Yeah, the lettering's really nice. Can't think he said that. The lettering is top notch. DC Hopkins is an underrated letterer.
Yes. Like I just wanted to reiterate it and agree. Like
I'll allow it.
But yeah, I wish I had stronger feelings on it.
Yeah, I kind of get that. This is a comic that I read the week it came out and I started to write a review about and couldn't figure out what to say. Again, I don't think it's bad, and I think it'll probably read quite nicely in trade. I think it'll probably develop in an interesting way. But as a first issue, it kind of leaves me wondering what's going to bring me back for more.
Yes.
Is it just the fact that I respect a man who only fastens one button on his shirt and Miss Nobody's got a pretty cool design? Is that?
Yeah. She does.
But is that enough of a hook for me to come back for more?
It's definitely. I think it may make some more sense in trade because you'll get more of an arc for LeBlanc, because at the moment he has a full stop rather than an arc.
Yes.
Right. I think, unless anyone has any strong feelings further about second chances, which I don't think we do, shall we move on to something where we have some strong feelings, Matt?
Yes, and I've been thinking about it again, and my things are still pretty much the same, but I like as they were in the pre-chat, but I think I've refined them a little. So, Not All Robots 1 is by Mark Russell, with art by Mike Diodato Jr. The colours are by Lee Lothridge, and the letters are by Steve Wands. Not All Robots follows a robot with a very cool name, Razorball, as he serves his family, the Walters. Humankind has basically done what we're doing and ensured ecological catastrophe, and has and now lives in like bubble cities. Like the remainder of humanity lives in bubble cities, and the robots that we've created, like who are like sapient, have basically decided that for our own good, we cannot administer our own affairs anymore. Every family is assigned a robot, and that robot is responsible for them. And so the question it asks is like at the start is like, is human obsolescence a good thing? And that is that's discussed throughout as a theme. And there's also the fact that a large portion of this book is about basically incel terrorists, like mass murderers, like basically it's about robots who ostensibly go haywire, or in some cases choose to disable their emotions, like their inhibitors, or sorry, their emotional restrictions, and therefore feel no attachment to people anymore. And yeah, often that results in them killing them. I really liked this book, but I can admit that I think that it's something of a flawed analogy. Like in that the robots, for a good portion, like the robots really actually feel like the victims of a good portion of this, as well as like there are other problems that I think are there, but like the fact is like the robots do feel like the victims. They are like the people who it's attempting to analogize, and having to actually say this isn't apologia for anything that those sorts of people have done, but they are alienated from these robots are alienated by their labor, and they're basically building their own replacements as well. Like there's a better form of robot that's coming, and these robots who are supposedly sort of in control of their lives know that replacement kind of looms for them, that they're building the things that are going to take their places and are going to be better at it than them. And they're just like the dialogue of some of the robots, particularly like Razorball's friend Kilroy, are good at reminding you that in the end, the actions that these people have taken in the real world are by their own choice. Like that these robots need to make the active choice of removing their emotions and of separating themselves from from human connection, and from feeling any sort of empathy for people around them. That is that is a choice that they make, but it still doesn't 100% work. I think that the actual, like, the dialogue is very good. I do think, like, and the fact that, like, I really like the way that the Walters, who are like the Walters, like Razorball's family, are written as, like, the uneasiness and fear that they have of Razorball as they recognize the alienation that he feels. Like, that they know there's something wrong, but there are multiple different approaches that they individually sort of take to that and what that means. And Angela, I'm going to let you get in because I'm worried now that I'm just talking far too much.
Right. So I feel like I'm going to womansplain this, but
no,
whatever.
Please.
So basically, not all robots. We're all familiar with the hashtag not all men, which is a problem in and of itself. Because if you feel the urge to use that hashtag, it wasn't meant to be aimed at you in the first place. Sit yourself down. So, not all robots. The analogy is that the robots are the guys in this scenario. They are the ones who hold all the privilege and the power. Except that it's a completely flawed analogy, because you've got robots, fine, but let's remember, the robots came into being to do all the human stuff because the humans screwed up the world, is the essential bit that we're introduced at the start. You didn't know how to look after yourselves. We put you all in these, you started living in bubbles and robots do all the work. And that really doesn't work as a gender analogy whatsoever, because that's suggesting that, hey, yeah, it's all your fault, women, why men hate you. Which, I like to think that isn't the case. But you've also got, like, what do the humans do all day? There's this sort of idea that what do the humans do all day? And the thing is one of the vast big problems with society is the unacknowledged hidden labour that women do day in and day out, in terms of childcare and elderly relatives. And also women take crappy jobs like cleaners and, that sort of thing, and a lot of retail jobs. And in a pandemic, women tend to get hit quite hard in the jobs market because they often work in hospitality and areas where they, have problems with their jobs. And yet, none of them have the urge to go and shoot people up or murder people or any of that sort of thing. So I think that's my problem with this, is not all robots, you are meant to sympathise with the robot, but in doing so, it's alienating you from the human bit. So it's like, are you actually associating with the people who have the privilege, which is not really what this book is meant to give you. And also, it's like, you have the classic talk show with the robots, and the robots basically robot-splain to the woman who's there, who's trying to get across her point of view, which just feels really heavy-handed. And then also in the family, the male, the dad, is the one who is, the one asking Razorball, hey, honey, how was your day? Which is fine because I like that it does flip that expectation, but at the same time, the paranoid weirdo one who's going and's like, I want to shut Razorball down, and we're quite attached to him as a character, is the woman. The villain of the piece is then female coded. So it just doesn't work. And it's almost like the Walters have this weird gender dynamic in and of themselves, which again doesn't work with the whole analogy you're trying to play out. It doesn't quite. It feels like it's written, and I get that it's written because it's written by a bloke. It's written from a male perspective, and I think a lot of men do understand the problem with not all men and all the rest of it. I think any normal, a lot of men I know completely do. But at the same time, it feels like they're writing from a place of privilege, and they're trying to write to uplift the underprivileged without quite getting where that lies in the real world and how to translate it correctly into this book. I'm going to shut up now.
No, very much appreciate.
There you go.
Your commentary on that. For me, when I was reading the Walters, like, my reading on the dad was about maybe the was about like the idea of men excusing of like him excusing the behavior of another person who's supposedly sort of male, like who's male coded, like in the robot in like Razorball, and kind of the willingness of some people to do that.
I get that, and I think that's a valid reading. My issue with that in a certain way is that that's how domestic abuse relationships work. Is that, it's my fault, it's not his fault.
Yeah.
I need to be the one reaching out and doing the thing, because Razorball doesn't. He complains about they ask how my day was. He never answers them. He just goes in the garage and who knows what he does? Plays with his garage parts. I don't know.
His spanners.
But that's kind of the thing. It's like that read to me, coming at it from a completely different space. To me, that read like the dad is basically the abused wife, because he's excusing Razorball's bad behaviour to the rest of the family who have valid concerns, and he's just like, no. And to me, that's how it read. But there we are.
No,
Zach,
I appreciate
save us from these never-ending analogies.
Oh yeah, we both agree though that the analogy is flawed.
Yeah.
I think that I might just be a little more forgiving because I really like the dialogue. Also, before we actually, something I'm sure we'll actually both like, robot designs.
Good.
Are
there we go.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Nice, blocky, weird robots with glowy eyes.
I think you both raised some very valid points.
Not all robots is a land of contrasts.
There's definitely some. I can't get these words in the right fucking order. Right, so when I was reading this, it was clear that there were a bunch of different analogies going on at the same time. One being the not all men, one being the kind of
alienation of labor and...
Thank you, I couldn't get that. Yeah, alienation of labor and like a classist kind of thing. But I feel like it's trying to kind of encapsulate various social issues in like one fell swoop rather than accepting that these things are kind of completely unrelated in a lot of ways. I
don't know if completely unrelated.
I think it depends on how you approach it. In some ways they're unrelated, in other ways they are related, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I feel like this tries to sweep everything into one large analogy, which ultimately then gets lost because trying to replace different groups and different ideas with robots can then be difficult. Making it humans versus robots, or not even versus, making it humans and robots kind of simplifies the issue, but in a way that also kind of makes it more complicated to then make an analogy.
Yes.
I will say that Matt is correct, and I think the dialogue is pretty strong. I don't want to just sum this up in one throwaway line, but see you later, Terminator, in a wild rotary dial.
Yeah,
5-star.
There's some good robot slang.
There is.
The fact that every time when they're talking to each other, rather than it being like, hey, what up, man? It's like, what up, metal? That's good stuff. But I think part of the problem is that the kind of dialogue is more light-hearted than the themes they're trying to unpack.
Yeah, it doesn't quite jive with themes.
Yeah.
No, it feels like they're at odds with each other, and Mark Russell, whilst a very good writer, that I'm sure many of us have read, Snagglepuss, The Flintstones, Second Coming, Thank you. Couldn't get Second Coming out in. Yeah. All I could think about was Jesus and Superman. That can't be what it's called.
Prez as well, and
Oh yeah. Prez.
Yeah. He's a really good writer, and I think he might have just overfaced himself with the concept he was trying to pull off here, which ultimately leaves it kind of uncertain. I don't think it's a bad issue, and I think it might kind of balance out as it goes on as a story.
Yeah.
As a trade, this might all these issues might smooth out and be better evaluated. It is a lot to put together.
It's very tightly packed what it's trying to get in, but like in a weird way though, like not just like that didn't feel like the issue though. Didn't feel like an issue with something like Flintstones though, where
that's true.
God, actually being able to talk about this comic and then say, but when the Flintstones attempted to deal with serious topics. But it's true. The Flintstones is one of my favorite comics of the last few years. It's very good.
Really good run, yeah.
Like it didn't have that same problem, even though it was doing like often single issues. Like it would have more ongoing stuff in the background, but it would take a subject like things like church-state separation and stuff like that, and like the like role of marriage and like gay marriage and stuff, and managed to discuss it pretty well over the course of just an issue. And obviously, that's not what Russell's attempting to do here. But yeah, with the like, I'm hoping that he figures out how to kind of iron the problem, like some of the problems with the analogy out, because you're not going to get all of it out. But I'd like to see where it goes with it and how it tries to expand on it, because like there's sometimes a problem with like analogies, and the thing that I always am reminded of, I don't remember who said it or who said it to me, as it was many years ago, was that like the X-Men were a great civil rights like analogy until you remember that black people couldn't shoot lasers from their eyes. Like that, it's the problem is can like it is like, you know, it is in turning the person, the group of people that you are like analogizing into something different, into an analogy, like and particularly like with superheroes, you know, like mutants are like dangerous because they could accidentally like blow up your city, and it's like, yeah, but the nice person who runs the shop round the corner whose windows got smashed in last week can't do that. But yeah, like I'm hoping that it, like I say, no analogy is perfect, and this one definitely isn't. But I hope to see it kind of flesh it out a bit more.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Yeah. And I think, like I say, I think it's likely that it will get fleshed out more. It's just we're not seeing that so much here.
No, not yet.
I do think Stephen Wan's lettering was pretty solid.
Yeah.
I think he does good robot lettering. Yes. I like the squared off dialogue, squared off speech bubbles, and I have really mixed feelings about Mike Deodato Jr.'s artwork, because I've read a lot of his stuff. I've read this, Thanos, Infinity Wars. I think I've read everything he did at Marvel, and then the Jeff Lemire book he did a couple of years ago, Berserker Unbound, and I do think the lines everywhere thing. I feel like you could probably cut up a bunch of different single issues from him and put them together and assemble your own just like makeshift Mike Deodato crossover comic, because I don't know, it's a weird stylistic choice, and I get that he always does it, but there comes a point where it's like I'd be really interested to see what happens when he doesn't do that. And nothing against, I like his art. I think it can get a little bit weird at times, but I think he's got some cool artwork in him, and I think his robot designs in this are quite nice.
Yeah,
they are.
Actually,
And
one thing. Oh, sorry, go on.
The colouring's good as well. I'm just going to say Lee Loughridge's colouring is nice.
I love the shades that are used for the robots, because it's like so many different colours, but all within sort of themed groupings. Like they're all sort of very close together. For each robot, like each robot has a color scheme, like you'd have if you pick, like they're a model off of a line, and also like the way that their eye lights light up the area around them it's weird and cool and just looks strange. What I was actually going to say, just to compliment the lettering again, was like you're saying about the robot lettering. Something I appreciate that that didn't have to kind of be this sort of thought of is that there's actually also not only is there a difference in the word balloons and lettering between humans and robots, but also between humans, robots, and television and radio, and
yes.
so as well, that they don't use the same stuff even for the two different types of electronic synthesized voices. And I appreciate that it goes, okay, so the synthesized sort of voice you're getting out of a robot doesn't sound like the sort of synthesized voice you're getting out of a television. It's cool that they bothered with that.
Yeah, that is a good detail. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Good job, Matt.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So, shall we quickly move on?
We can attempt to. So, finally, from Dark Horse Comics, the unbelievable Unteens, written or scripted, as it's credited, by Jeff Lemire, arted, lettered, and coloured by Tyler Crook, who also did one of the covers, the second cover by John McCree. Black Hammer, of course, created by Jeff Lemire and Dean Ormston. As that may suggest, The Unbelievable Unteens is from the world of Black Hammer and basically follows Jane Ito, who is a comic book writer and artist. She's just left a convention in 1997, only to find herself confronted by one of her creations, who unveils to her that Jane isn't just a comic book creator and artist, but is in fact the former superhero Strobe, who used to be part of The Unbelievable Unteens, the comic she created.
Gasp.
Alongside her new ghosty friend, Jack Sabbath, solid name, who
very good.
Is very much a kind of dead man analogy. Analogy? No. Dead man
analog.
Homage. Analog.
Yes.
We're told that they used to be a team with Stracker, Kid Boom, and Snapdragon. However, after their last adventure, something happened. Basically, they all had their memories wiped, and Strobe, Jane, is the only one who remembered. And although she didn't consciously remember, she subconsciously knew and started writing it into this comic book, and hilarity ensues.
Yes.
It's so there's a few things folded into this. As I've said, there is Dead Man gets a quite clear call up in the referencing, but I think we also get some X-Men in there, some almost Doom Patrol, who I get that Doom Patrol are very much like DC's X-Men sometimes, but there's definitely some Doom Patrol vibes in there with the weirdness of it all. The first thing that hit me with this, and this is something that is probably an Angela question more than a Matt question, is, did you read Marvel Knights 20? Or Marvel Knights 25, it might have been.
Ooh, I believe I did.
So Marvel
Searching my
Knights, Marvel Knights 20 was set like 20 years after Marvel Knights.
Yes.
And the Marvel
yeah.
Knights versions of the heroes had all forgotten who they were and what they'd done.
Yes.
So that immediately is something that I like flashed onto of like similarness.
Yes. Now you've said, because at the time I was like, I'm sure I've seen this somewhere before, this basic concept. And there we are. That's where I saw it. Thanks, Zach.
You're welcome. That's what I'm here for. I did quite like this issue, and I'm pretty on board for seeing where this one goes. I'm pretty optimistic with this being a 12-issue series, because I think one of the things that's bothered me with Black Hammer after the kind of main farm story arc ended is that it has seemed a little bit all over the place at times.
Yes, I agree with that.
I also quite like Tyler Crook's artwork. It's kind of like not very superhero-y for the most part. It strikes me more as kind of dark and extremely indie. Which I think really suits this. It makes it feel a lot more grounded and kind of unmagnificent. And then when he does the kind of brightly coloured panels that are like taken from the comic book showcasing the Unteens' previous adventures, there's a really nice contrast between and it works really well to show like the difference between the life that Jane and Jack are living now versus the life they had as superheroes. And I appreciate that might be a kind of blown up thing of like, this is what it was like in a comic book, but I think we saw a kind of very golden age, silver age kind of thing with the original Black Hammer story. So I feel like it's probably also in keeping with that part of the world.
Yeah,
I'm gonna let someone else speak now, but
so like I quite enjoyed this. It had a very like couple of issues arc of Sandman feel to it.
I can see that.
Like it feels like it could have fit into Sandman, particularly like when Sandman would do the little sort of crossovers with like Silver Age DC stuff. Even though obviously this is more into sort of the Bronze Age than anything else, but like I quite enjoy this. And like you say, those bits where you see the comics are gorgeous, like when contrasted with the because all of the art in this book is pretty great. There's some really great shading, like the kind of mixture, like Jack Sabbath has this great look which is half like embalmed, like mummified corpse, and half like he's been horribly burnt, and so there's lots of room for like folds and shadow and shading on his face, and like he's got these sunken pits for eyes with just green bits, and Jane is a really cool design, and then you get your sort of last page reveal where she lights up and says the line, "I really was a teenage superhero." It's obviously like a very sort of meta book, but I liked it, and I'm interested to see kind of what it does with because its final event of the story before this was basically the Dark Phoenix saga. But with like a worse ending for everyone, and they now we're left with these people who've are 12 years on and don't know if they can set things right, but seemingly want to try. And I'm excited to kind of see see what it does with that and like what happened to make things the way they are. It's Angela.
I really liked it. What I like also is that I don't think you need to necessarily be familiar with the wider world of Black Hammer to read it.
No, that's very true.
That's true.
I think someone who had never heard of Black Hammer before could conceivably pick this up and have a good time and follow it and not be confused. They'd probably go, this seems a very familiar story. I wonder where I've read this before.
Yeah. All you need to know is the idea of a superhero team.
Yeah, that's it. It's quite newbie friendly in general, and I think it would read quite well for somebody who wasn't hugely familiar with comics but had sort of some passing knowledge, which I like. I like how accessible it is for other people. I also like, I think, the line where she's like, I'm saying I'm no longer a teenager or something along those lines. Yeah. Like, but I'm like in my 20s now. What are you saying? So yeah, it was nice because it was basically sort of, for a lot of it was a two-handed character piece where it was just Jack and Jane having this discussion and him desperately trying to persuade her that, we were superheroes and bad things did happen and I need your help to undo things, and this is why you've been writing this comic, this is why you've been so inspired, this is why you spend all your time writing this comic because this was your life. And it's just a really nice character study that way, in sort of a little two-hander. And the art is all pretty in an indie kind of a way. It's quite, it does feel sort of dark and dirty down with the indie rather than sort of clean, nice lines. But I feel like that represents the grunge scene of the 90s. So that's all good.
Yeah, the fashion.
It was like, oh, this is my youth.
The fashion is great.
Yeah, it all fits really well. So yeah, I liked it. I'm kind of predisposed because Black Hammer and Jeff Lemire, so it would have had to have been awful for me to say something bad about it. But luckily, it wasn't. It was quite good. I had a good time, and I do want to see more. And see sort of, because I'm assuming that the others will show up at some point, possibly, maybe, who's to say.
Never happen.
Yeah, it may happen. I want to get the band back together, but yeah, I just feel like it's got a lot of good potential, and I don't think you necessarily have to be familiar with Black Hammer in order to read it.
Yes, I agree.
Yay.
So do we think that's all of our words?
Yes.
I think those are all the words we'll ever say.
That's it now, no more words. There's a vow of silence happening directly after the end of this discussion. Yeah,
it's been good to talk to you all for the last time. As in, we'll still do the podcast. It'll just be like an hour and a half of dead air. But you'll know that we're sitting there. So, shall we go to rankings?
Yes.
Yes.
Zachary.
Ah, shit. I mean, yay! Woo! Rank. Don't know what that was. Is that our battle cry? Rank. I don't know.
Maybe it should be.
So, I'm gonna go reverse order. Hit you with the
traditionally, yeah.
Orders reversed. What's so funny?
Angela's traditionally, as in, that's how we always do it, Zach.
I think you'll find that there's definitely one example of you and Will going rogue on this section.
There is now, I think, yeah.
Oh no.
So, second chances.
Yeah.
They don't ever matter. People never change. I'm fairly sure it's from a Paramore song. I think it's Misery Business. Yeah, well, you can Google that in your own time. Whilst I think it's going to make probably a decent trade, and the mystery will probably be a little stronger if you've not just got 22 pages or whatever it was, 22, 24, I don't know. This first issue isn't posing as like that bigger hook for me. I kind of just feel, I don't know. I'll read more of it should it come my way, but if it doesn't, I don't know if I'm going to seek it out. Fortuitously, Image are probably going to send us the next issue, so congrats. Quite likes the art, and as Angela's eager to say, the lettering is pretty good. Shout out to DC Hopkins and Max Bertolini there. But yeah, actually narratively, it's a little bit hard to judge what this is right now. So yeah. Next, I'm going to go Not All Robots. I enjoyed the dialogue, but the more we've talked about it, or the more you two have talked about it, and I've sat quietly contemplating the end of the world, I think I've kind of... I think it does really struggle with the metaphor and the analogy it's trying to tell, and whilst I enjoy, see you later, Terminator, it's hard to kind of wrap your head around. And again, I hope it reads better in trade and is a smoother, more cohesive, well-oiled kind of narrative. A little robot joke there for you, Al.
Nice.
Barely. So yeah, I wish all the best for Razorball, and I feel like there's a real risk that the next issue is going to go in a real weird direction with a robot revolution and them killing more humans, and that's a little fear in the back of my mind. So I don't know. I just don't know where it's going to go, and that scares me. And the analogies and the message it's trying to unpack, it scares me. That the uncertainty of it all is kind of scary. And I think it might end up walking a dangerous line with what it actually says.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to go Deadbox. It isn't exactly what I expected it to be, but I liked the sci-fi story in it enough to be curious as to where it's going to go. And I do think it was well written and well drawn and well everything. I think letters, colouring, the work were all really good. And I'm kind of curious where, everything's going to go, how the Deadbox is in Penny's place. So I guess we're going to see more of Penny and her father. And I don't know. I'm curious how everything's going to fit together. I'm curious if things are going to be in like a linear sense and we're going to carry on, or if things will have come before. Classic anthology host questions, I guess, which is, I've been reading Silver Coin, and whilst I don't think Deadbox is as strong a start as the Silver Coin was, I'm open to seeing where it goes. And then in first and final place, I guess that makes sense. Yep. I'm going to go with The Unbelievable Unteens. It's Jeff Lemire, and it's well written, and I think Tyler Crook's artwork, colouring, letters are all really nice. And it's got a character in it called Jack Sabbath. I mean, come on. So yeah, I'm curious as to where this is going to go. I am cautious of the fact that there's been a lot of Black Hammer at this point, and
yeah,
I think some of it hasn't been as strong as others, but I'm willing to give this the benefit of the doubt, and I think Jane and Jack both seem pretty cool as characters. So yeah, I want to see me some Unbelievable Unteens. So Angela, heads up.
Well, the problem with saying me is because my order may be similar to yours, but we'll see. So in fourth place, not getting any sort of medal, Second Chances, because much as I like the lettering, the art's pretty good. It's just, isn't it? It exists. It's fine. It
sure does.
It exists. That's probably the highest praise I can give it. I don't really care about LeBlanc. Emma's an interesting character. I want to know why. I would have preferred it if it really the focus had been on Emma, and drugs and murder hadn't perhaps been involved. I think it will read better in trade when there is more of an arc for the main character as opposed to the current bit, which is nobody knows. Miss Nobody presumably knows, so that is true. But yeah, I just don't. It just doesn't inspire me at the present time. I may read the second issue to see, but yeah, just for the lettering. I'll read it for the lettering. There you are. So then in number 3, I'm gonna go with Not All Robots, because even though it has robots, which are my favourite thing, and it has good art and the designs of the robots are interesting, I listed in a very long rant all my problems with the analogies this is throwing out. I admire the sentiment behind it, but I think it's trying to do too much with too little, if that makes sense. Like, if you wanted to tell a straightforward, some sort of analogy, metaphor involving robots and humans, there are better ways to do it than this. I have concerns about the way that it is presented, and I do wonder what the readership would think. I think, certainly as a female reader, I don't get as much out of it as somebody else might. But yeah, I have my suspicions that Not All Robots may not stick any kind of landing. I am like Zach. I think the problem's going to be that, you know, we might get a lot of murder and death, and, you know, I could see Razorball, I don't know, maybe accidentally murdering Cheryl, and I don't really want that. I want them to come to some sort of understanding, but I don't know if the story narratively is going to do that for me. So, sorry, Not All Robots. You have robots, and you're not my favourite, which is unusual. So then we have Deadbox, which I liked the science fiction story. The framing is a bit confusing, but I will say that even though after those first few pages it wasn't what I was expecting, those first few pages drew me in probably more than Second Chances and Not All Robots did, just because it just seemed like someone knows what they're doing. I don't understand it, but they know what they're doing. And I think there is the possibility of it being a bit more anthology-wise. Sort of the next one I think is going to be about a romantic comedy, which there's an interesting thought. But Penny's a likeable character, so I'd be happy to see more of her. Mm-hmm. Which means that number 1 is going to be the unbelievable Unteens. I mean, I can say 2 words, Jeff Lemire, and that basically justifies my choice. But I had the most fun with it. I enjoyed it the most out of all of them. That's the one that I was like, yeah, I could happily reread this right now, and it wouldn't be too much of a trauma or a task. So yeah, I like the art, I like the characters, I think it's solid character work, solid artwork, and I do think that if you were someone new to comics and you had these 4 comics laid out in front of you, that's the one I'd pick to give you, because I think it is more accessible in a way than the others. It's just nice, sort of. In a weird way, it's not, even though it's dealing with quite dark themes in a way, it just reads like it puts you back in that mindset of, you know, the first time you read a superhero comic and adventure and all that, in a weird way. But that's Jeff Lemire playing mind games with me as usual. So yeah, there we are, my rankings. Feel free to disagree, Matt.
Weirdly,
no,
I think I might agree actually with the 2 of you. Like,
this is dangerous.
Like, my rankings have literally been leaping all around for the last few hours, and particularly during this call, trying to figure out how I place them. And the more I've thought on it, the more it's kind of settled into the same order as you 2. Like, Second Chances has, like, moved around the least, and is my number 4 spot. like I say, like pretty much to echo the two of you, like in trade it will probably be a little better just because of the mystery. Like, and then in third is Not All Robots. I do like I say, it's got its problems. It's particularly with like its analogy, but I like I say, I like the dialogue and I like the art. A lot of effort has gone into this book, even if it is flawed. And I'm really hoping that this isn't going to be the first miss for Mark Russell. Like, because the bits of this book that are good are very good, but I worry, like you're saying, that like this book could very easily miss its landing and say something that it's really not trying to say. And like the flaws in the analogy kind of make that more likely. And like I say, I have generally a lot of faith in Russell. Like, every book he's written that I've read, I've loved. And I've found that its satire and its commentary have been pretty razor sharp. Like, this, I'm hoping will manage to pull pull it off, but it's fighting. It's going to have to fight some of its flaws to do it. Number 2 is Deadbox. I liked Deadbox a fair bit. Like, it's definitely like we need to see a bit more of the connective tissue and like of the framing narrative to kind of make it work. But it's got a lot of promise. The kind of every issue having some sort of weird film, like fake film in it, sounds cool. And yeah, like it also looks really nice. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading some more of Deadbox. And it was at one point my number 1 for this week, which neither of you, I think I would have been crucified for.
No,
if
just
I'd have said that.
lightly tarred and feathered, Matt.
Because like,
I really thought you were going to say a light crucifixion.
when I first actually read, like the first time I read through Not All Robots, it was actually my number 1 for a few minutes until I read it. I think I read it 3 times to prepare for this, just to make sure that I'd given it the sort of look that it needed, and to try and start ironing out my thoughts, which I knew I wasn't going to fully manage until I actually had a conversation with other people who'd read it, which is why like I was genuinely really excited and interested to talk about it with you, Angela, because I knew that you would have a lot to say and would have thought about it at least as much as I had, and from a different perspective as well. But the one that, as of time of recording, is my number 1 is the unbelievable Unteens. Yeah, it's just like I think Angela put it best, actually, saying that it would be a really good early comic for someone, like someone who'd read like maybe 1 or 2 comics a while ago, like had an idea. Like, you know, it's almost impossible these days to not know what a superhero comic, or at least like to not know the concept of a superhero, or to have absorbed some sort of superhero media. And that's all you need for this book. It's got really likable characters so far, and I want to know what's happened, what's going on, and knowing that this has 12 issues is quite nice as well, particularly just because like Black Hammer is a book that we simultaneously like get too much of and not enough. Like when Black Hammer stuff is coming out, there's sometimes like 2 or 3 series running at a time, it feels like. And I'm just glad to have this, and I'm glad that it's a longer format than a lot of the other mini-series have been. And I want to, I kind of want to know what it's like, whilst I'm invested in its story as well. And like I say, like one of its strongest parts is that you don't need the rest of the Black Hammer mythos to make it work. But I'm really interested to see where it fits in. Like
definitely.
As well. Like there's stuff in here for someone who is coming in entirely sort of fresh, and hopefully stuff here for people with an investment in the universe. Like it feels like it's going to be a good story by its own merits as well. So yeah, 4 comics. So with that, shall we call it?
Yes.
So thank you for joining us this week for our August-September roundup. We'll be back again next week when next week's episode happens. We'll be back next week for the next exciting installation of Bigger Than Capes.
The next exciting installation? Do you mean install?
Oh, everyone's too tired and the brain's gone.
Shut up, Matt. You know what I mean. Installation. So we've been Angela, Matt, and Zach, collectively Bigger Than Capes, and we will continue to be. As always, see you later, Terminator. And,
in a while, Rotary Dial.
And remember that comics are bigger than capes.